There we go. The recording has been started. Welcome everybody to the Sunday Night Roundtable. Tonight's session, okay, so there's a couple announcements. Next week will be our last roundtable of the season. And we're going to do another Get to Know You team. We're going to do a Get to Know Binary Battalion, which is 7028, right? Is my memory correct?
Yeah.
So we're going to do Binary Battalion next week, and then that'll be the end of the roundtables for the summer. We usually take the summers off. The one time we tried to do over the summer, it didn't go so well. So we take the summers off. We're going to plan to resume in October. I think we'll probably start back with our first session probably about or around mini trials, because that seems to be a very popular thing to do to kick us off in the fall. And then I'm also working on setting up a bunch of plan presentations. I think we already have 2 set up through Nicole Chassau, and some first folks are going to give presentations in the fall. So assuming that all works out and goes through, our fall is going to fill up pretty quick. So I'm going to try to get the schedule out, or at least the sign-up sheet, so folks can sign up for sessions early, maybe as soon as next week. And then we'll start filling the rest of those holes that we don't fill up with official first presentations. All right, with that, tonight's talk is Get to Know 2129 Ultraviolet, and Mason is going to kick us off here. So Mason, can you introduce yourself and anyone else you want to introduce from your team?
For sure.
And we'll get rolling.
Yeah, so I'm Mason. I was captain of Ultraviolet for 2023 and 2024 as assistant 2023. And then this year I stepped back to a senior advisor role. But I've been leading robot design for a couple of years now, done some programming. So I've been here and there. We also have Jerry's in the call. He's another senior with me. He's mostly build. We have Kaylin, who runs our CNC. And then Tim and Jonathan and Lynn, mentors. So yeah, I think we can get started. So first, we've had quite an incredible recent run, more or less. So starting in 2022, that was our first time qualifying for champs, first time finalist, a lot of firsts that year. Coming out of COVID, we had a surprisingly strong season, even with only a few people on the team. I think we were at 12 people, but a very committed 12. 2023 did better, didn't quite qualify for champs that year, but we got our first off-season win at the Getch with a brand new robot for that, using some parts from our main robot. And then 2024 is an incredible season, qualified for the World Championship. We won the Seven Rivers Regional, among other things. And then 2025 was pretty enjoyable as well. Not quite as successful as 2024 in terms of winning, but we had a great run of regionals, especially. Yeah. So as a little bit of background, our team is, I'd say, relatively small. So we have, I think, 24 students around that this year. We're usually around the 20 student mark. I think that's kind of a sweet spot for our team and Southwest High School. And then, like I said, we were 12 students in 2022. So we've grown quite a bit, and definitely experienced some growing pains during that time. But the more people allows us to build a more ambitious robot. I think 7 primary mentors is right. So a lot less mentors than students, but we usually have 2.5, 3 mentors in the shop average per night. Depends on some of them, especially after 6 o'clock, it's a lot easier to get mentors. But especially having committed mentors who come in frequently is a big help. And then kind of unusual, it seems, for a lot of the teams is we only have 2 captains. We have a captain who's a junior and an assistant captain who's a sophomore. The goal with the captains is to, with having so few in comparison to other teams, is it makes sure that we don't have so many people in like a leadership position that you kind of have a 2-part separation of the team where you have like the people in leadership and people not. It makes communication a lot easier, as well as shifting the captains down a year, which we did kind of starting 2023, where we had a junior 2023 we had a senior captain and a sophomore assistant captain, but now we've been trying to stick to a junior captain and the assistant who's a sophomore. So it gives you a year to learn before you become like a full captain. but also it makes sure that we don't end up just losing people to graduation. You lose all this knowledge. It lets the previous captain have a year to sort of pass down more of that knowledge. Budget around $25,000, not including champs. That's mostly coming from sponsorships and grants, same as pretty much everybody else. I think this year our ratio is more towards grants and less towards sponsorships. We lost our $10,000 sponsorship from United Health 2 years ago, so that was kind of a big hit. But we've pulled it back this year. Our budget was a bit smaller than 2024, but we're make the most of it. And then Southwest High School, it's a great school, but it's shrinking kind of. It's designed. The school itself is designed for 2,000. We have like 1,200 students, so bigger than some of the schools, especially bigger than Great River or Avalon. But the number of people who would potentially be interested in robotics is relatively small. We have a lot of other things that we're good at, especially the arts is the main competition for robotics. A lot of people choose to do the play, and that's totally fine. But it means that recruitment is a challenge every year. So I mentioned the leadership structure. So we have the two captains, and there's not really a specific layout for like exactly what the captains should do. I mean, they fill in as they're sort of needed, depending on how much leadership is required, especially for that year. Sometimes we have a lot of new members, and that will make it more challenging. Versus if you have mostly a returning team, that'll make it a bit easier. So we also have other leads, which is a not quite the same as like what other teams would consider a captain, but they're in charge of their respective field. And then they all fall under our technical lead and non-technical lead. And so the goal there is to kind of add some sort of structure. So the non-technical lead would be in charge of the other non-technical things like business or media, and make sure they're working together and things are getting done. Not necessarily doing it themselves, but delegating from there. We've had 2 scouting leads in the past, which is nice because it means that if somebody's missing for competition, we still have another person. And it means that somebody can take a break from being sort of the person like collects all the data and puts it together, and pass it off to the other scouting lead. That's been a nice combo. Media lead. All the rest of these are kind of self-explanatory. Yeah, I think they're pretty normal. And then why so few leads and captains, especially the flat hierarchy. It makes it a lot easier for communication, and also, like I said, it removes some of the structures that separate people. Where you don't have things where you have just like the captains doing something completely on their own. So the goal is to try and get everybody, push everybody up instead of separate everybody out. So we're expecting a level of leadership from everybody, including the people not explicitly listed as a lead, that's higher than I think would be expected if you have more of a hierarchy system. And that's been pretty effective. That's kind of a change since the 2022 season, especially 2023, where we did have more of the hierarchy. That was the goal, flattening it out and keeping the very small number of captains, despite the team growing, has been effective for us. One thing that helps a lot with that is our open leadership meetings. So instead of having like we used to do leadership meetings over Google Meet. Like I think it was on the weekends. I can't remember. That was during COVID too, so it changes some things. Um, but now we've been doing it in the shop right after our normal meeting on Mondays. So that's at 6 o'clock. It means that students can stay after the meeting to attend the leadership meeting if they want to. So we expect the leads to show up. They can't always do that, and that's okay. But for the other students, it's completely open. So if they want to know what's going on with the leadership, be a part of the decision making, they can be there for that. Especially if they have something that they want to bring up, a problem or something that they're seeing that should be changed, they can attend those and bring it up themselves, without like a specific invite or anything. Everybody's invited. Um, as well as we've tried to keep them a bit shorter. We used to have leadership meetings that really dragged on, but um, yeah, especially inviting more people, make sure that we're not wasting anybody's time, and that's been going well. And the effect of that is increasing transparency. I think the whole team feels like they know more about what's going on, and there's not decisions being made behind closed doors. And it improves the decision making, where if we have more people there and more perspectives, we're making better decisions with that. All right. So the first kind of key to our success over the past years has been the underclassmen, and that starts out with recruitment. So we have a club fair in the fall at Southwest. It's called First Friday, and we've more or less had to fight for them to keep doing that. They had it in 2022 and then tried to cut it for 2023 entirely. So we had to switch to some other ways of recruiting members, but then managed to convince the school to do it again, although it's in a lesser capacity than it used to be. So that's hurt our recruitment opportunities, as it's like a club fair during lunch one day, second Friday of the year. And so we don't get as many people as we wish to. But with being successful in previous seasons, more people are familiar with our team, have seen the website, and will come to us even if they didn't manage to make it to us during the club fair. And so that's kind of been a change too. We also get a lot of people through like friends, but also connections like band. A lot of our team members are in the arts. I'm in choir this year, but I've been in band in the past. Um, so a lot of people have friends through those who would also be interested in robotics. And we target each year trying to recruit around 15 new students ish. We usually get around 50% of students will stick around after attending a info session or something like that. So just because somebody fills out the Google form that says I'm interested doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be still around at kickoff. And that's okay. Most of those people have chosen to spend their time doing something else. It's not like we're doing something bad necessarily. It's just they'd rather be doing theater. They'd rather be doing a sport. Um, and so we have info sessions to make the commitment very clear, because something that we don't want is people to show up not really knowing how much is expected from them, especially at the start of the season. So they think, okay, 3 hours, 2 days a week during the off season, that seems fine. But then when we go, okay, now we're going to expect 3 times that amount of time during the season, and you start getting people backing out, it's like, okay, we want to have people who know exactly what's expected from them from the beginning. So our info sessions, which we usually have two of, which happen right after the club fair, like the few days following that, allow students and their parents to go there, learn more about the team, and then especially want to communicate exactly what's expected for team members in terms of the amount of time they'd have to spend. And so a lot of the times the students will go, "Oh yeah, I'm totally willing to spend that time," and the parents go, "Really?" Because you're doing all these other things, and so it's unfortunate when we end up with somebody who doesn't join the team because of that, but at the same time, we don't want somebody who joins and isn't able to spend the amount of time that they wish they could. Um, yeah, so the first thing we do with the new people, like first day, is an egg drop, which is a lot of fun. I think it gets everybody to know each other, so we intentionally make groups with the rookies and the experienced team members. And the goal is more or less just to have fun. We have some awards that aren't necessarily just like did your egg survive? It's like most creative, or I think we had a most economical one with like the least amount of resources. And the rules are pretty limited. Pretty much the only rule is well, gracious professionalism, and then don't copy the Mark Rober design because it's too good. And then we just get whatever trash is around kind of and recycle that to make the egg drop devices. And some work a lot better than others. Southwest has a huge like multi-story staircase that we can drop them off of. That's super fun because you can go up to the third floor and drop it from there, and they mostly don't survive. So it's mostly just to have fun and get everybody to know each other. We're not trying to like judge people by it or anything like that. Um, and then our main training comes from mini trials. We have other off-season events. We do MRI and we've done MMR. But mini trials is where the rookies really get to shine. This year we were immensely successful at mini trials. We won day 2 of it with no mythic, and really had a great time. And so one of the things we try to do is everybody levels up sort of one level in experience. So the senior members and the really experienced members will try and act more like mentors, more of a hands-off approach where they're kind of letting it happen and aiding where it needed. The second year students who are now it's the people who were around for mini trials last year take a leadership position, which they might not have otherwise. And the rookies will take like the build position and try to make the decisions. And we chose to use more traditional robot construction materials. So a lot of teams opt for wood, especially for their mini trials robot. But we figure if we want students to be prepared for the main season, they should already be using the skills to work with metal. And the cost is relatively low for the 2x1 extrusion we're using for that. So our robot was made out of polycarbonate and metal because we wanted students to have that experience coming into the main season. Um, and so it's generally not very well put together. It's put together in a hurry, and that's kind of the point. Um, but we are trying to take some techniques that we've used from main ones. So even this year, the pivot, we used a technique that we ended up using on the main robot for 2025. So we learned from many trials to build the main robot, which is kind of interesting. And also the concept of failing forward. So there's varying levels of aid from especially the older students in terms of like how much to help the rookies when they're designing the robot. Our goal with that isn't to let them totally just face plant and build something that will be discouraging more than helpful, but definitely letting them fail. So things will not work the first try. That's okay, but we want to necessarily guide them to a path where there is a successful option down the road. If they keep making improvements to it, they can have a robot that works, and that's a lot more fun to do at many trials. Having a robot that works somewhat, even if not very well. Um, yeah. All right, and then arguably the most important part of onboarding is getting everybody to have fun together and be more or less friends. So in the past, we've done sledding, video games, ice cream, gone to a Twins game with um, in regards to the MSHSL state championship last year. Sledding's been super fun. When we get a lot of snow, we'll go out and do that. And usually these activities are initiated by the seniors, which kind of sends the message that they want the whole team involved. Especially, I think our freshmen could talk better to it. Kaylin, this is maybe you, but um, like a few nights ago, we were playing Fortnite. Yeah, doing things with like the seniors and the freshmen together, it gets everybody more involved. It means you don't have that separation of like there's the seniors on one level and the freshmen on a completely different one. Yeah, so we all go sledding or get ice cream together, that kind of thing. And so that's not official by the team, but it's organized with team members. All right, another thing we do much later during the training period that's been super helpful for the past couple of years is our design rules discussion. So this usually happens right before winter break. So basically the last time that we meet before kickoff. And the goal is to outline all of the mechanisms that we think we could build, um, like the ones that we know of, and it would be pretty common. And then specifically mark down the ones that we know how to build and have done in the past. So those are the ones in green, like our swerve drive, telescoping arms, single and double wheel flywheel, that kind of thing. The ones in yellow are ones that we'd be willing to try, but we have not done in the past. So like this year we had a cascade elevator on our main robot, but that's something that we hadn't done in the past or didn't have any experience with. And then the ones in red and in dark orange is like we'd really have to have a good reason to do it. And the red things are um, design mechanisms that we would try to avoid. So the purpose of doing the design rules before kickoff is to narrow down some of the discussion on kickoff, especially about the mechanisms, to ones that we can feasibly pull off. Because while it's fun to discuss having an 8 jointed arm, it's not necessarily a productive use of time, especially with time being so valuable. The first 2 days of kickoff. So like this year we chose Cascade Elevator was a yellow item. It was something that was like we don't want to do multiple of these yellow items on the same year. Trying to do a fully experimental robot, something we have no experience with. But then like we did Swerve Drive and we did a Rolly Grabber, which we're very comfortable with. It also lets the newer members see all sorts of different mechanisms. So for each of these, we come up with like an image or a video of a robot that had it in the past, which helps with the discussion. So everybody knows what we're talking about. But it also means that when we get to kickoff, people have seen some robots with different mechanisms, different ways to solve those problems. And it just helps a lot when we're generating ideas. So it's kind of like creativity with limitations is something that I've read about in the past. Where sometimes putting a few limitations on what you can do makes your use of those more creative. So you go, okay, if a elevator is yellow, maybe we can combine 2 of them to do a ladderator as well, that kind of thing, as opposed to coming up with ideas that are just completely goofy. Yeah. All right. Number 2 is kind of like our work environment, as well as the atmosphere around it. So first is our example schedule for a week during the build season. So this is way more than it is during the off season, but we'd meet 3 hours Monday, 3 hours Friday, and then 6 hours Tuesday and Thursday, with dinner in the middle, which is provided by generous parents, and they sign up via like a go what's it called? I can't remember. It's like a sign up sheet. Um, and so this is what we'd show in the info session, and basically, okay, this is how much we'd want to be meeting during the season, but the expectation isn't that you show up to every time. We don't have mandatory attendance. We do take attendance, or try to, but it doesn't reflect on you for like going to competition, that sort of thing. We're fortunate as a small team that we can bring everybody to competition, so there's no cutoff for like you need to send a certain amount of time. For example, Rain, our main programmer, in 2022, she had math classes after school like every Tuesday. So that cuts, 6 hours a week or whatever, but still can hold a leadership position, can still do all of these other things because we understand that people want to do other things. I think if we said that only people who can show up every time are on the team, we'd have very, very few people. Yeah, and so put a greater emphasis on what you're doing with the time in the shop than necessarily just how much time you spend. And so part of that is also making the whole shop time more enjoyable. So we have snacks, we have sometimes music when it's not too much, and having fun. We definitely encourage some of that, but also want to stay productive. So that's kind of the balance that we run there. One way that we keep ourselves productive is with to-do lists. We've done this in varying capacities in the past. So when I was captain, I made personalized to-do lists on several different days. On the left is an example of one of them. So first, I would break down every single thing that had to get done into a large to-do list, like a traditional, like this is exactly what needs to get done on the robot. But then break those down into what each person will be best at doing. So um, each of these items, a lot of them say like who could help with that, mentors or other students, if they need help with that job, and then different things need different levels of explanation. So for some of the really experienced team members, it would just be like really small lists, because they more or less know what to do. You just give them kind of a direction to go and they do it. But other people will need a little more explanation about how to do it. It also lets us keep on track, so we know what's getting done. We know what still needs to get done via the to-do list. Sometimes a whiteboard's right, but usually I'd make a Google Doc, and that helps a lot. So this takes quite a while to make. I do it during lunch, but the simpler, just like exactly when you just get on the robot, that only takes 10 or 15 minutes, and it helps us quite a bit. So everybody can reference that and know what they're doing. Along with the to-do list, we have recaps. So we have a Discord server that is used somewhat for communication and somewhat for fun. And so we have a channel on there specifically for recaps. And that makes sure that all of the team members, like I said, not everybody shows up every time, and that's not expected. But we want to make sure that they're all on the same track, especially when they come back, they know what's going on. So that's the purpose of the recaps. So we let everybody know what we did that night, and what needs to get done in the future as a result of that. It was especially important later in the build season, as we start to go to Mira to test the practice field, and need to let the team know kind of what broke, what worked, what didn't. Um, there were a couple of days where the recap was the good, the bad, and the ugly, as we had parts totally fail at the practice field. But we need to make sure everybody knows that. So it was also a great opportunity to shout out people, like their really hard work that week or whatever. Yeah, so that's kind of what the recaps were about. And then the last one was a robot. I don't have many specific points about that, but I can talk about what we've sort of learned from each robot. On the upper left is Bert, our 2022 robot, which kind of look back on fondly, but also it was not a very good robot. We learned a lot. So learning, especially things about maintenance, how to design things so they don't fail, how they're assemblable, modularity, all sorts of things. We managed to qualify for the world championship, and on the bus ride home, so many ideas were produced. We were making lists about, okay, what things can we do better next year? So that kind of fed into our 2023 robot Nessie, which was extremely reliable. At our second event, it didn't break. No part of it broke, except for the battery strap. And we're pretty happy with the performance, especially the reliability, but we're looking for more competitive aspects. And so that kind of fed into our 2024 robot Chester, which starting our second event, we did every part of the game except for the trap. And so that was something kind of different than Nessie, where Nessie couldn't do everything. Like couldn't pick up cones off the floor, that kind of thing. Versus Chester could pick up off the floor, could shoot into the high goal, could amp, all that stuff. And so with Chester, we were more learning about how to manage the increased complexity with so many subsystems and fit everything under the weight limit and within the size limit. We were 124.9 pounds at champs. So we were right at the limit of weight. But that robot was very successful, especially our upgrades for state helped us a lot with indexing. And so it also kind of led to the 2025 mentality of if it's not perfect, we can keep working on it. Which didn't pan out super great in 2025. We have a lot of mechanisms that didn't make it on the robot or did and then got taken back off. So ironically, the robot looks basically the same at the end of the season as it did at the beginning, but wasn't because we weren't trying. So yeah, but it was one of the better core bots in the state. Pretty proud of that. And we were just trying to focus on doing one thing really, really well and super reliably, very fast, and let the programming kind of take more of the highlight with that robot. Our programming also improved a lot throughout these robots. So with our 2022 robot, it was me and Rain, our first year doing code at all, especially for robots. So it was a swerve drive, which was really complicated. And you can kind of make it out from the image. We had mini sims for the steer motors, which makes everything way harder because you don't have any sort of sensor inside the motor. And our swerve never really worked that well that year. So we learned from that. But then kind of going more and more automation. 2023, we had a nearly fully automated robot and then turned it back down for our second event and did way better because we realized that there's an extent to which it's actually helpful. Same thing at 2024, we were learning more about what makes the vision work and what makes it break. So then we switched from custom vision in 2024 to line lights in 2025. That's helped us. We had no vision failures and had a really efficient system. I have a demonstration video that we got at Mira. Completely scoring on the reef. So it's being told to just go to random positions. There is no operator at all. And it's just doing them all in a random order and going to the closest feeder station. So it took a lot of work to get to that point. Essentially, every year we learned something new about automation. So switching to Path Planner in 2023 was like the first step. We still needed to have really good localization, which we didn't have that year yet. So like I said, we switched to a custom vision solution 2024 and then back to Limelight in 2025. And then learning more about sort of how to tune in the autonomous. Especially for this, we needed it to be reliable, scoring all sorts of places, not necessarily just the places we score during a real auto. So the way that we're doing that is with a custom pathfinding algorithm that will calculate the most optimal route by distance to any point using tangent lines. I could talk about more. I'm not the one who wrote it, but I know a good bit about it. So that's allowing us to score on the back of the reef where we don't ever during auto because it doesn't help us at all. And then also getting the timing down for everything else. So all of this autonomous is about 20 lines in code, but it's using all sorts of library stuff that we've written in the past. And our pathfinding algorithm we've been working on since the off season of 2021. So it's crazy to see it all working finally. In 2025, it's over 4 years in the works. Yeah. Move on to the questions. Yeah. So questions. I've also added some like things that we could talk about too if you're curious. But what questions do you guys have? Scott?
I'm going to start at the beginning. So you had mentioned that your captain structure with your like team captains. So this year you were advisory captain? Is that what you called it?
Senior advisor is what Nate King, who won Dean's List at Champs, he kind of coined the term, but yeah, so helping out the captains, but taking a big step back.
So then your seniors are sort of advisors. Your junior is the captain, and then you have a sophomore as an assistant captain. Is that a fairly rigid structure in terms of sophomore, junior, senior, or does that change based on who you have? How does that structure, is that rigid every year, or does it change? Maybe let's start with that.
Yeah, it's not super rigid. We don't have enough. We don't have enough years with that system to have a great example. So 2022, we had co-captains who were both. One was a sophomore, one was a junior, one was a senior. And so 2023, we had a senior captain, sophomore assistant captain. But I've been trying to do the junior sophomore setup more rigidly than we have in the past. It kind of changed since shortly after COVID because we've had way more people that we can choose people for each role from that year. So right now we only have 2 juniors, but one of them was already kind of doing leadership stuff, and that made sense to put them as captain or as assistant captain last year. And so having the progression system where they're only 1 year apart makes it so that you can go from assistant captain to captain, and then also stopping seniors from being captain makes sense in that they don't just leave, and the knowledge that they've learned as captain never gets passed down. So we've been trying to emphasize that, but I think in some cases we would avoid it.
When do you choose your captains? What time of year? Is that in the fall? Is that in the spring? Is it in the winter?
It's about now. So we have a end of year celebration in a park, and so that's when we announce the new leadership. So the captain is, I think, mostly decided by like a poll from the rest of the students. Yeah, but that's around now. And then this year was a weird exception. We didn't have a clear person for assistant captain. So it kind of took until we're going to try and use mini trials as the sort of test grounds, see who rises to the top of leadership and who wants to take on those roles. But that didn't really work out that great either. So this year is an exception to that, like naming people in the spring. All right, who is next? Aphomia?
I actually had another question, but I'm just gonna pile on to the talk about the progression system. I think I remember talking about this within another team, but I was just curious. So for your assistant captains that are usually sophomores, is that kind of a one-person role? So do you like pretty much know who's going to be captain the next year? Or is it more of like a trial system with multiple people? Like how does the progression work? Is it kind of guaranteed?
It's usually a one person guaranteed. Generally, we like the assistant captain quite a bit if they've gotten to that point. Like I said, this year it was kind of strange because there wasn't a single person who was showing a lot of leadership as a freshman and really clearly wanted to be assistant captain. But usually it is expected that the assistant captain will become captain. I think that's what's happening for next year. Although I'm a little bit checked out of that.
So it's kind of based on like the effort and involvement in freshman and sophomore years.
Yeah. If people change like a lot during their sophomore year, then it is a situation where we might consider somebody else. That's a little bit what's going on like right now. But usually it's kind of a good indicator if they're really involved as a freshman and as a sophomore, then they would probably be captain the next year.
That makes sense.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I might just comment. This is Tim. I'm the one of the lead mentors for 2129. This has been a kind of a strange year because we had a really kind of a small group of sophomores and juniors join the team over the last couple of years, and then I think we had 9 freshmen walk in the door. So, a third of the team, and it takes time to get to know the people, and it takes time for people who join the team to decide that robotics is their number one priority. I mean, it's the kind of thing where you can't do 3 different things, and robotics is one of them because it just doesn't work very well. So the junior captain and sophomore assistant captain is something we really have to work pretty hard to make happen. But it is happening, I'm pleased to say.
I just wanted to say a word about that too, because I don't think it's clear that the students nominate either themselves or other students for roles, but that's ultimately going to be decided by mentors actually this week. We're going to decide who the new assistant captain is. So they nominate, but ultimately it's like kind of a mentor discussion and decision. But usually it's kind of clear, and last year it really wasn't. So that's how it worked.
And the purpose of the mentor involvement there is sort of to make it less of a popularity contest where if somebody has a lot of friends on the team, they can take a position that maybe they're not quite as qualified as somebody else for. But usually it follows the nominations pretty closely. Yeah, any other questions? Especially I didn't go super deep into code or the robot, but if there's anything about that in particular. Yeah.
I have another question about the team. One of the things that we wanted to focus on for the next season was kind of bridging the gap between, people who are able to put in like 30, 40 hours a week, show up to all the optionals, and then people who do show up to the meetings just aren't able to that same degree. And it kind of seemed like there was a lot of falling behind, or like we wanted to improve the communication basically. And we were thinking of kind of similar to what you said of having like a recap system, or just making sure that you communicate what happens at every meeting, whether it's optional or not. But I kind of wanted to know, like on your team, whose responsibility are those messages? Like, is like the sub team captains take responsibility for their sub teams, or is it your team captain, or like who? How does that system work?
It's usually been the team captain. I've done some of that this year where if the captain was gone that day, then as a senior advisor, I would do the recap for that day, especially for the days that we were at Miro with just a few people. One of those people have to put out the recap. So it's not usually the sub team leads, but usually what happens is like if I don't know what's going on with specific sub team, I'd message that person and see what they have, and then usually just copy and paste what they put into a master recap for the day. Our team is small enough and the shop is small enough you can generally know what's going on with every sub team because it's 10 feet away. So it's not been a huge problem, but yeah. The other thing that helped us this year was we started doing sort of like a mini meeting at the beginning of our work time. So if we're working for 3 hours, you'd spend 10 minutes at the beginning going over what we did the previous day, as well as what we want to focus on for that day. And then letting people bring up any ideas or like worries that they have about what's going on with the robot. Yeah, Scott.
Can we go back to, I'm very intrigued by teams, especially this year. Well, there's been a lot of discussion among mentors in Minnesota that have happened both in the mentor Slack, but then I've had some in-person discussions about just how elevated the high level of play has been in Minnesota in the most recent years. We've really seen Minnesota climb. Maybe I shouldn't say climb higher, but the volume of teams that are competing at a much higher level seems to be there. There's some statistics around the state tournament for Minnesota that shows our playoff matches in Minnesota had an average score significantly higher than most of the regionals and even half of the divisions at champs, which is really interesting. And you made some good observations about what you think kind of, I would say, flip that switch for you guys starting in 2022. Can we go back to that and maybe expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah. So the main thing that happened in 2022 is because we came into the year with only 2 people who had ever gone through a season before. So that was Nate and Georgia, who were both Dean's List finalists. Nate was a winner, but it kind of encouraged everybody, especially the underclassmen, to take so much more responsibility for the robot themselves. And so having sort of a panic period helped us a lot there, where we were everybody needed to put in maximum effort just to be able to get a robot together, and we barely got it together by week 1. And so that jump started the excitement to keep doing better, that competitive drive, especially qualifying for champs let us see all like the highest level of play and aspire to that. Especially on the bus ride home, it was like, okay, we're nowhere near any of those teams, so how do we get there? And that's what we spent the last few years doing. The other aspects that have helped with that, aside from just needing to put in more work, is the encouragement of doing somewhat well, like 1 year. If that was the best we'd done as a team, we made it to finals, and it was like, okay, we can really do so much better. We can win it. And so, losing finals because our robot was unreliable and in 2022 pushed us to go for the maximum reliability, that kind of thing. And so it's usually the previous year that's driving the decisions for the next design year. That's actually kind of why our robot doesn't have a deep climb on it this year, is because the trap was a trap for us in 2024. So it kind of gave deja vu on a kickoff day. It's like, okay, the deep climb looks really hard and we don't want to design the whole robot around that one aspect. Kind of like what happened with the trap. Yeah, does that answer it?
Yeah, I'm curious. You had also mentioned something about code, and I saw your amazing auto, which I'd love to talk more about if we have time. But have you put a bigger emphasis on code, or in any way? Is that just kind of a side comment about your code?
Yeah, the code gets a huge emphasis. I'd say on Ultraviolet. One thing that helps with that is on our team, we don't have like the specific sub teams of like, there's the programming people and there's the design people and there's a mix of them. So like I said, I started with code and then I switched more to design. Rain also started on code and switched a little more to design. So like she did the camera mounts and that sort of thing, and helped a lot on the 2023 robot. And so it means that there's a lot more discussion about how we can make the robot more controllable from a programming standpoint, how we can make it more competitive during auto, and how we can increase the potential like ceiling for the robot with code. So you build a robot that might not have like, it might have a low floor, but if it has a really high ceiling that we can get up to, especially with our 2024 robot, like we designed it so it can shoot from beyond the wing line, and it could. And so increasing like the maximum that we can get to with code, we know we can get there at this point with some experienced programmers and a code base that's been being worked on for 4 years. Yeah, and so the other programming things is like carrying, learning from 1 year to the next. So what I mentioned with the pathfinding, where we've been working on it for 4 years, there's other things like that too. Like our particle filtering for our vision estimates, that's something that we've been doing for multiple years, all the way back to 2022. As well as like swerve drive, we've done that so many different ways now, because we started that off season of 2021. So we've written the whole code so many times at this point, like we're very comfortable doing swerve and doing swerve autonomous. Yeah. So certainly programming gets an emphasis, because it is, I think, a lot of what makes us competitive. Like our robot isn't anything super special, especially this year. It's an elevator with an end effector. A lot of teams have that, but the autonomous lineup and the super reliable three-piece auto boosted us quite a bit.
Just as an aside, Mason, this is Tim again. When Mason and Rain joined the team as freshmen right out of COVID, they both brought a lot of experience. Rain was already an electronics person, a programmer, a data person. It was pretty amazing. So there was a jump start on robotics. And right now we have the same situation where we have a bunch of new freshmen coming in. And, I think we're optimistic, but you don't know where you're going to start actually. So I think we're in a good position, but I do want to acknowledge Mason and Rain as extraordinary new members right when we needed them.
Yeah. And like I was talking about with the panic drive to learn really fast, I joined the team with zero experience with programming. And so I spent winter break learning how to do the swerve drive, because I was like, if I don't learn how to do it right now, we're not going to have it on the robot, and then I'd have to learn how to do a tank drive. So either way, it's not easy. And so the pressure of needing to get it done, that's what boosted us quite a bit, even in programming. Yeah, AE.
Hi, Mason. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I'm one of the mentors of 2530. I just want to say our team has always really admired your team, and particularly your programming and your autonomous, and always look out for that every year. So just kudos to you guys. You already kind of answered half my question, which was how do you like you said, hey, you didn't have any experience and you kind of self-taught. Do you guys specifically recruit for programmers? We find ourselves a little on the short side in that area, surprisingly, in our area. We lack a programming mentor consistently. We're working on that, but what is that like in your team? And I missed the early part also. How big is your team totally?
We're 24.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. We have a lot of the same challenges as you do. So we can't really just recruit for people who already know programming, because that's nobody. Like our school system, we lost all of our programming classes at Southwest. In 2023, they moved them to North High School, or to North CTE. So we don't have any options to learn programming through classes at nearby anymore. So now it's been students teaching students, which doesn't always work that great. Now we have a few mentors who've kind of joined in to learn. They're sort of acting as a buffer, so the experienced programmers try to teach the mentors, and then the mentors teach the students, and that means that knowledge will stick around a little bit longer. So instead of having an expiration date on anything that you learn being 4 years, hopefully it sticks around with the mentor for a little bit longer than that, or they can teach it to somebody else. Because one of the problems with that too, with students teaching others, is you don't want to completely burn out trying to share all the stuff that you've learned all at once. And then also, it's kind of just the commitment has helped us a bit, or has hurt us a little bit with learning programming, is that not everybody really wants to do it as dedicatedly as others. And at some point it does come down to, I pretty strongly believe that every programmer at some point is a self-taught programmer. You do need to at some point just sit down and learn it yourself. So to get to the level that we're at, I think you can get to an adequate level where you can definitely program a robot just by learning from classes and from online resources. But to get to that, get the pathfinding, get that other stuff, you really have to spend a lot of time on your own outside of robotics learning it. And that's just kind of the truth, is programming takes so much longer to learn than almost every other skill with robotics. And there's just not enough hours that we can possibly spend in the shop to learn everything. So like most of the robot code for actually all of these robots was written outside of the shop, like by far the majority. Recently it was a lot because of the simulated code that we worked on starting 2023. So like our whole robot is simulated. It means we can test out those autonomous things in a simulator before we put it on the real robot, and so it saves us time in that regard. But yeah, with the training, it's super hard to recruit anybody. A lot of people show interest in programming, but don't have quite enough interest to take the leap of faith and try to learn it on their own. So that's something that we're kind of struggling with, and we'll see how that goes for the next year, because myself and Rain are two like main programmers. We're both graduating. Rain's going into, I think, computer science at the U of M, and I'm going to mechanical engineering. So we'll see where the programming goes from here. But thankfully now we have a programming mentor who's helped out a lot.
Well, good luck in your education. I think you hit on a little bit of the secret sauce just in of itself, whether it's in programming or any domain, is you clearly are a self-starter, and people who are motivated to do their learning outside of the shop hours and have that drive to figure it out on their own are what makes every team tick. And it's hard to find those people and know up front that you have those people and how to identify them. I wish we could have a roundtable on that, because if anybody knows, I want to know.
Yeah, and it's hard to get people to that point too. It really, they need to come in with that mentality that they're going to have to learn it on their own. And it's super hard to recruit. It's usually the quiet people from my experience. So when we have recruitment events or that kind of thing, you search out for the people who are watching closely but not necessarily talking. That's the people that I've noticed are particularly interested in learning things on their own outside of robotics. So yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, Scott.
So I'm looking at your robot from this year, and it looks like just about every single part in that robot's been through a CNC. What does your shop look like, and how do you teach your students? Well, first of all, did you make your parts yourself? And if you did, then how are you teaching your students to do all that?
Hey, Kaylin, you want to talk about that? No, he doesn't want to. He's shy, but Kaylin is our CNC guy. He and Henry, who's a senior. So Kaylin's a freshman. He's been learning from Henry, who's a senior. It's an entirely student skill. I think that's something really cool about Ultraviolet is our CNC is passed from one student to the next, kind of by an apprenticeship is basically what it is. So like Kaylin would know better than I do, but when he was starting out, it would be like, help out, like set up the material on the CNC bed or whatever it's called, like mounting it. And then eventually Kaylin was doing all the G code and then running more of the machine. And there's been a couple times where Henry's been out of town and Kaylin's had to make parts, and that is definitely challenging, but definitely got the hang of it too. So it's students passing it down, and every part of our robot was made in-house. It's all in the shop, including our belly pan, which Kaylin can attest to was a massive project because the G code alone would take a couple minutes to load. It's entirely pocketed out. It was a challenging cut, as well as some of the other ones with tubes. Really long tubes are tricky. But our CNC, we have a Omeo X8. So a lot of teams have that, but it's in a custom enclosure that we built in 2020. So we got the CNC off season of 2019 and have ramped up the usage every year. So every year there's more parts that are CNC'd. I think Bert on the upper left, the 2022 robot was probably the first one that was majority CNC'd, if not entirely. And then virtually every robot since that has been almost entirely CNC'd. It gets us so much more precision and speed than doing it by hand.
Do you guys have a tube jig? I'm guessing
We
you
have
a tube jig based
we
on.
have clamps. Yeah.
Oh, so you use the clamps. Okay.
We don't. It's not great. It doesn't work very well, and we have to use like extra bolts to hold the clamps in place because they won't stay on their own. But it works well enough, and it means that like our CNC is too small to do the verticals on our 2025 robot because they're 37 inches long, and
Right.
we can only go up to 22, 24. So you have to do it in two different cuts and then flip it over. But it's surprisingly seamless in the middle where you had to split it. I don't really know how they do that so well. It comes down to like zeroing it really well, I think.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, it's impressive. I mean, to do that amount of weight reduction in tube is very, very impressive. It's not something that we have done on KnightKrawler yet. We've never done weight reduction on our tubing. Part of it is I don't know that our build students would tolerate cutting a piece of metal and then not having it for a few hours to start putting things together. The wait between the time they would cut everything for their elevator and then they would have to wait to actually assemble it might frustrate them, but I'm envious. I really think you've done a really nice job here with your machining.
We've got a couple bits that are kind of interesting in the weight reduction sense. So the first thing that I tried new that's this year, I don't know that I can zoom in. Okay. Is these like holes on the 1 inch wide face? It's something that I've done only when it definitely doesn't need structural integrity, because from an engineering standpoint, it's a very poor decision to cut away that material because it's adding most of the stiffness to the entire beam, because it's further away from the twisting axis. But at the same time, it saves quite a bit of weight. I saw it on High Tide's robot in 2022 and have been trying to copy some of that technique. The other interesting thing that we tried out this year, you can see on this polycarb plate, it's actually 2 layers of 3/16 polycarbonate where one of them is solid and one of them is pocketed. It came down to we didn't have any 1/4 inch polycarbonate in the shop, or very, very little, but we had a ton of 3/16. And so to save a lot of cost, we went for 3/16 instead. And so it gets the same bending as a solid sheet of 1/4 inch, but it's similar weight to a pocketed sheet of 1/4 inch. It's surprisingly light because we can go for these really aggressive pockets on the polycarbonate that normally we wouldn't be able to if it was a solid sheet because it would just be too flexible. So it has some advantages there, as well as we've learned some CAD techniques that make the pocketing really, really fast. So we're in SolidWorks. I know most teams at this point are probably using Onshape. but it's sort of like my technique is I will cut away a rectangle or whatever shape it is that I can cut away the maximum of weight. So like no ribs, nothing like that. It's like on this gearbox plate, I cut away everything except for the material around the bearing and the outside lines. And then from there, I can take a line tool and then draw the lines that I want to connect them with. So for a tube, I just draw like a diagonal line back and forth. And so I can pocket, I think I catted this entire tube for the elevator in about 2 minutes. So 2 minutes of CAD and then half an hour of CNCing, and you've cut quite a bit of weight. In this case, it cut enough weight on our elevator that we didn't have to buy any 16th inch tubing. The whole robot's 1/8 inch. And so we really need a pocket to stay under the weight limit and to keep the CG low. This robot was 108. So surprisingly light given how much aluminum is on it.
Are you also using SolidWorks for your CAM software?
No, we're using Fusion for that.
Fusion. Okay. Yeah. So when you say you're doing some advanced stuff, are you using adaptive clearing and to clear out all that extra material? Kaylin's like, yeah, sometimes.
Well, I think it's mostly 2D contour, which is
Okay.
like, I'd say it's kind of it's the riskier method, because what happens is you cut away the outside of the pocket
Right.
and
And
leave
then
it
it
up
goes-
materials in the middle.
It goes flying.
So either it goes flying or you put a specific bolt,
Right.
a hole right through the middle. I don't know if you did any of that this year, Kaylin, but I know in the past, Henry has asked if I can put an extra hole in the middle of where the pocket is. So when it does the drilling path, it'll add an extra one. You can put down a bolt to hold down that loose piece of metal so you don't end up breaking any bits. But the 2D contour saves so much time versus an adaptive clear because it's only doing one cut. As well as for some of the aluminum, we can do it in just like 1 or 2 depths of cut versus with like 1/4 inch polycarbonate, you kind of need to do at least 3. So like with the 3/16 polycarb, we can do it all in 1 depth of cut and it goes really fast. And the whole belly pan is 1/8 inch, so that was 1 depth too. You just go straight through and cut it out. And then let all the little rectangle pocket things just fly all over the place. So yeah. I also think I've seen you and Henry where you get like the vacuum and basically just wait for it to nearly pop up if it's a really small piece of metal and just vacuum it up right after it pops off the build plate, or what you call it, like the sacrificial board, so that it doesn't get the opportunity to fly around. Yeah, kind of challenging and a little bit risky. And it usually, our whole CNC is thankfully covered in, it's got like a polycarb, or it's got a clear plastic board cover all around it. So nothing can actually fly out of it, but it can fly around in the machine.
You know, another comment here. We've had the CNC router since 2019. We got it just before COVID, and then went away for 15 months and came back and picked up where we left off. Since then, in fact, as soon as we got it, it totally changed the design process, because we used to prototype manually, and the ability to model, cut, assemble, and go through that cycle 2 or 3 or 4 times, and the time that would have taken to physically prototype before is really, it's just, it's game changing. And the example that comes to mind is on the 2024 robot. We had side plates on our over the bumper intake, and they were polycarbonate. We were regularly fracturing, I think it was 1/4 or 3/8 polycarbonate, because we
Half
were
inch.
half inch. Okay. So, I mean, we had some pretty beefy polycarbonate that we kept breaking, and it was through a 4-part process where we ended up laminating aluminum to both sides in designed, engineered configurations, trying to imagine where we were going to experience the stress. And we got to a configuration that was very durable. And at Champs, I was with Mason when we went over and talked to Citrus Circuits, and we saw essentially the same assembly on their robot that we had on ours. I mean, it's you find your way through the process if you can move fast enough. So I think it's really important that that the router is part of our process now. And Kalen, he's the guy that walked in the door, his eyes lit up. He is now our CNC guy. And Kalen is participating in training on a CNC mill that we have at Mira. We have grant requests in for other CNC machines up there as well. So I'm hoping, Kaylin, that you have an understudy as soon as we have new freshmen. And we'll start building a team for CNC, as well as getting designers to understand, just how to pocket things. Because I think you've gotten a really good sense that Mason has done this a lot and really, is deep on where you can cut and where you can't. And that's just so important.
Yeah, this year we also learned more about the mathematical side of pocketing. So it's kind of visible from the photo, but we have a belt that's running our arm this year. We ran into an insane amount of problems with that belt. It just wanted to skip no matter what. And one of the problems that we figured out is that the bottom plate supporting the hex shaft here was actually twisting up because the whole tube underneath it was twisting. Like I said, with like the 1-inch side face, pocketing that reduces the stiffness of the bar a lot. And so that's something where I went into a ANSYS simulation to figure out exactly where I could remove material without having it lose the stiffness where I need it around the belt. And it kind of came up with what I expected, where it does not pocket the side faces at all, but it pockets the 2-inch wide faces a lot. And so the computer simulations can kind of help you learn where you can cut material, but it kind of comes down to more of I almost think of it as more of an artistic sense for pocketing. My main design thing that I've been doing for the years that I've been in charge of the robots is if it looks weird, it'll probably work weird. So try to make robots that look solidly built, because they generally will be. And pocketing is a big part of that. If the pocketing looks off, I will completely start over and redo it. So like there's some plates that I can even like see from the photos that I just wish I would have redone on previous robots, like this side plate down here for intake mount. Looked weird and it bent kind of exactly where I was expecting it to. And so it eventually, once you've done enough pocketing, you come to the point where you can just look at something and tell where you could remove more material or where you need to add a rib. Yeah, it for me, it's more of an art than it is a science, because most of the time I'm not doing a simulation to check if I'm right about where to remove the material. And generally everything is still kind of overbuilt. Like we could even remove a lot more material on our end effector, but it's just not really worth the risk. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
So I was looking back in preparation for this roundtable at your history and your recent history, and I would say that you have an unusually high percentage of Dean's List finalists.
Yeah.
Do you have any secret sauce you're willing to share? Is there anything that leads to that kind of success for your team specifically that you think other teams may be missing?
My hunch, and there's really no way of knowing. I think a bunch of it comes down to the essays, but one thing that sets people up on our team maybe unusually well is that the maximum amount of stuff that you can do is limitless. I've seen on other teams where there are a lot of the members belong to one sub team. It's like, okay, you may be the best programmer, but that's you just do programming. Versus on our team, you could do everything if you really apply yourself to it. And it's encouraged to learn a whole bunch of different skills, but also to lead new projects. I think we have a unusual amount of like student ideas that become reality in terms of outreach events, in terms of robot stuff, shop improvements, all sorts of things, where pretty much everything that happens on Ultraviolet started with a student's idea. And so to get to the Dean's List level, it's a lot about having a variety of experiences, taking a lot of initiative. And those are things that I think our team just sets up very well, because we have pretty small mentor involvement in terms of like decision making, as well as we have a virtually limitless amount of stuff that you could potentially learn. So that's something that I've loved about my time on Ultraviolet, is I wasn't limited to just programming or limited to just CAD. I could learn both, and I can do business stuff and, go talk to sponsors, and I can go, I take photos for a match or whatever. So we have a lot more ability that you can do multiple things. That might be part of it. I think somewhat just having a very dedicated group of students, like I said, with the 12 coming out of COVID, Um, that definitely boosted people a lot, where it just set the standard where it was like, if you're not doing it, it's just not getting done by anybody. You have to take the initiative, otherwise it won't happen. Yeah, I think that's the best explanation I have. Tim, you might have a different perspective on that.
It is definitely a student-led organization. The mentors, we're diligent about standing back. And I think that does cause the student leadership in particular to step forward, but it also makes it possible for the younger people to take ad hoc leadership for projects. Some of the people that have done best, I mean, everybody comes in with a different background, and Dean's List is supposed to not be who you were before you showed up on the team. But the more experience you have in other leadership roles, the better off you are in terms of stepping into those roles and being successful with the team, whether it's outreach or team leadership. And I just think we have a really, we don't attract all the people we want, but we attract the really good people we want to keep. So it's that. Yeah. In short, I can't tell you, Scott. I don't know.
You guys have both brought up outreach, and I saw on your final slide, Mason, you said ask us about other things to talk about. I would like to hear about your outreach robot.
Yeah. So our outreach robot is currently under a redesign from the younger members. So the seniors are now gone, but yeah, they've taken initiative. I can probably pull up a photo of it, or somebody else might be able to, but I can try to describe it. We're using the 2017 wiffle balls as like the main item. The idea with that is that it's light enough it doesn't hurt anybody. You can get a lot of them for really cheap, so we're not that concerned about losing them. Especially we have an entire bin from 2017. I think a lot of people do. Andy Mark can't give away enough of them. And if you put a backspin on it, they roll right back to the robot, so you don't lose them. So we have a shooter that will launch them really high, but not very far. And that was the first thing that we ever CNC'd. So it was kind of a test bit for our outreach robot. And then attached to that is a ramp that holds about 8 balls or something like that. So it starts out really high, and then it kind of like the balls will roll down into the shooter. And then there's a servo that blocks the shooter until we open it, and then all the balls can roll through. So it's only got a few motors on the entire robot. It can also drive, which makes it pretty reliable, which is the main thing we're looking at with outreach events. But it's also fun because the kids can put it back in the robot and then watch them roll down as they shoot out. And then from a software side, we wanted to let kids at outreach events drive the robot. However, we don't want them hurting anybody. So we bring 2 controllers with us. One of them is like the dummy controller, and the other one is the real one. So it's not dummy in that it does nothing, but it'll control the shooter. Unless the main controller, if you hold down a button, it'll just stop the other one from doing anything. So if the kid starts doing something that you don't want them doing, somebody's about to put their hand in the robot and they're still revving up the flywheel, you can just hit a button and everything shuts off. But also on the main controller, if you hold down 2 buttons, it lets the dummy controller drive the drive base of the robot. So if we have especially an older kid who we kind of trust to drive it and there's nobody around, can hold that down. Then as soon as they start doing something dumb, you lift a hand off the controller and theirs dies. So we have some safety technology built in there, but we want to let kids do as much as they can while still being safe. And we've done some of that stuff with the main robot too in the past for outreach events, where we'll bind some buttons to a second controller, but not all of them, because we don't want them doing everything the robot can necessarily. But like we'll let them. Last year we would let them hold on like the amp button, which would put the shooter up high enough that you can just kind of plop out the notes so it doesn't go flying everywhere. So kind of taking some safety into account with the outreach robot. It's fully covered in bumpers, and the battery lasts a really long time on it. But they're currently redesigning it, so instead of having like the ramp like I was talking about that loops around to go into the shooter, it'll have more of like a bucket kind of thing, so the kids can throw the balls in from a little bit longer range. So it means that they're less encouraged to go right up to the robot and touch it. So it's another safety thing there, as well as I think they're looking into different ways to angle the shooter, because we go to a couple of outreach events inside where we don't want to shoot the balls straight up pretty much. So in those cases, we just have to turn down the speed so it'll kind of go more out than up. But they're trying to actually angle it a little bit down so we can shoot it more over than up. And the backspin is super helpful because the balls will just fly up and then come basically straight back down because of the holes in the ball. Yeah. The other outreach thing that I've listed on there is the science fair that we run. So we have a local elementary school, Wyndham, that we found out had no science fairs at all. Like they don't have a science fair. And we sought to change that. So we started a science fair there. So what that meant is our students went in, I think 3 times the first year. So we went in like one time for an introduction session to introduce it to the elementary schoolers. Like the idea of a science fair, what it's about, and get them excited to generate ideas, get them to group up and, like make little groups and sign up with ideas for the science fair. Then we went for 2 like help sessions. So it was us working with the school to make it happen because we couldn't be there enough to like let the kids make their projects while we were there, but we could be there for help sessions where help them if they get stuck, help them generate ideas. Especially it's helpful because we've seen a lot more as high school students, but also as robotics students, where you have some ideas like, okay, you're interested in, bridges. Well, here's some different types you could look at. And, you could look at why each type of bridge might be used in a different spot, that sort of thing. We're just trying to build upon the ideas that they already have. And then we went in as judges on the last day, like during the science fair presentation itself, where we weren't giving any prizes or anything. We showed up in white lab coats though, with like the ultraviolet shirts, and so the kids think that's really cool because you look like a scientist judging their projects. But then basically just like talk to them and listen to what they have to say and offer some stuff that's like, okay, you're interested in this, you might also be interested in that. And so that was a lot of fun because it really did make a difference. The kids loved it, and when we did it again last year, so the second time, we had an insane turnout. I think we had like 60% of students in 4th and 5th grade did the science fair. And we opened it up to 3rd graders as well last year. The first year we did just 4th and 5th because we didn't want it to get too big too quick to where we wouldn't be able to run it. And I think now it's becoming more and more stable. So at this point, it takes very little involvement from us to make it happen. Which is great because then we can still do the bits like the introduction session and the judging where we get to make the biggest impact, but not spend as much time running it as it can kind of just happen year after year. I think that's that was the perfect ending is where it can happen on its own and we get to be as involved as we sort of want to be. Yeah. Any other questions?
I just wanted to
Yeah.
say the science fair is an absolute passion project of mine, and I love doing it so much. And the little kids absolutely think the high school kids are like they're like gods. They're like celebrities when they come in. So it's super and fun. It's super exciting and fun getting involved with these little elementary school kids. And we've persuaded their school to do science fair in December, which is I don't know if they love it, but we really can't do science fair, normal science fair time of year in like March or April. Doesn't really work. So yeah, it's been really good.
And I will also share that back before they changed the school schedule. So it used to be that high school got out before junior high, and our high school kids would go over to the junior high for the last period of the day and work with the math class or the physics class, and we do robot demos. It was super funny to hear them say the robotics kids are so cool, because you don't hear that anywhere else, right? But when you take those robotics kids into the lower level grades and you show them really cool technology, really cool stuff, it is a great experience for those kids, but it's also a big ego boost for our kids as well. So I'm curious what this Our Tiny Pit is. Isn't your pit the same size as everybody else's pit?
It is when we set it up, but when we pack it down, it's tiny. We show up to competition in a minivan usually, with everything we need. So kind of stemmed with going to the World Championship as in 2022, we couldn't bring everything that we normally did. And so we've come up with different solutions with carts to bring stuff. So where other teams will have like the big rolly tool cases, the super pit. The problem with the super pit is that you need a trailer to be able to transport it, and we don't have a trailer. our school doesn't even have a parking lot where we can put a trailer, and we wouldn't know where to put it. So instead, we have systems where we take 6 totes, like for the 2015 totes, to competition with us, and then 4 of them will go into sets of like a stack of 2, where they're opened up. I wish I had a better picture of our setup. I'm sure somebody will have it, but they're like leaned upwards so you can get to the inside of it, and they're open, but then on top of each other. And the whole cart that goes onto packs down to something about this tall, just basically the height of the wheels, and then that acts as a roller, so you can put 3 totes on it and roll it into the competition. And it means that everything packs down really, really tiny. It's been great for us because we get to bring everything. Especially, it's easy to remember to bring things when you do the same setup year after year, which we've figured out the hard way a bunch of times where we've tried to switch around the pit. We've also learned the more open space you have in the pit, the more enjoyable the experience is for the people in the pit. So having the smaller stuff that fits in there is nice for that. So we have a tool case, 6 totes, 1 table, and the batteries charger, and that's it. And so it's something that we can bring exactly the same thing to champs as we do to a regional, or to an off-season event. It's the same stuff everywhere. The only competition that we brought less stuff to was mini trials, as far as I know, this year, just because we didn't need it. So yeah, I wish I had better pictures, but the goal was definitely to get it as small as possible, which works well for our team with the minivan. We have a kind of funny story where we were loading into North Star this year at Mariucci. And we were being interviewed by a news crew outside, and they were waiting for us to pull up, and they asked us, "Oh, so where's your trailer?" I was like, no, it's just the minivan. It's all coming in a minivan. And so it's fun because it's super easy to load in, and gives us a lot of space. Yeah.
I was gonna say that I don't think Mason was entirely clear, but like these things basically pack down into like a kind of square, are they square or rectangle? Like these
A
rolling
rectangle.
carts, but then they go up there almost like origami, like, but it's wood. It's hard to explain, and that's all designed by our mentor Kevin. That was actually not a student project. That was a mentor project. Well, they're trying to keep their hands off the robot because they're not supposed to put their hands on the robot. They built these amazing carts. Well, Kevin
Yeah.
designed these carts, and then other mentors help build these carts, and they're just fantastic.
That it is kind of a recurring thing where the students have basically just like, I think the mentors realize that the students just got it, like they will get it done, they'll get the robot. So the mentors are kind of bored, and they start making shop improvement projects or pit improvement shop projects, which makes everything really it's great because then it's like, wow, our pit is tiny and super efficient now. I'm trying to pull up a picture of it.
Mason?
Does that mean you also have this really unique and fancy robot cart that folds down to nothing as well? What do you do for a robot cart?
Oh, that's also an interesting question. So we used to have another one of those shop improvement project type robot carts. So we took a wagon and then completely rebuilt the top of it. So we kept the bottom frame and the wheels, but then we built our own structure on top. So it had the structure on top was about yay high, and the robot sat on top of it, on top of this wagon. And so it would be able to hold like 10 batteries in it, so we could roll it to the pit when we're unloading from the car. And then on top of that, we go the robot, and we had like room for trays and all this other stuff. And then this year with the rules, last year we weren't ready for the rules change where they let you bring the cart onto the field. So we just didn't. We lifted the robot. That's hard on everybody's back, and it's not very fun. So instead we went for a tiny cart, which is the one that we normally use to bring to mirror the practice field, that does actually fold down. So it's also like yay high, but then the handle slides into it. And so it's this tiny little, like really, really light plastic cart that you can set the robot on. It has no features whatsoever except that it moves, but it lets us put it on the field, and it's easy to transport. Jerry has something to add. Jerry, I don't think your mic is working.
Can you hear me now? I
Yes.
apologize. So currently in our Slack, I've lost it magically. Oh, here it is. If I could share my screen.
Mason, you might need to
think I
stop
need to stop,
sharing
yeah.
to let Jerry share.
This might take a while. I apologize. There we go. So right here is our pit, and this is like an actual picture of it. Mason, if you want, you can explain a little bit more. I'm not really good at explaining it.
Yeah, so the devices on the left with the yellow and green bins, that's what I'm talking about. So those things that hold up the bins flatten down to be like 6 inches tall, and it becomes a tray for the bins to sit on, so you can roll them to the competition. So there's 4 that are held up like that, and then the other 2 go underneath the table, and those have stuff that we mostly just take all of it out right away. So it's got like the lights for the pit, the fan that we have in the pit. It's got like extension cords, and then our safety stuff. So those are harder to get to, but also we just don't need to get to them because we've already taken everything out. And then the bins, we have it color coded. So like yellow is our spares, green is our hardware, red is like electrical stuff, and then blue is everything else, like tape. So those bins, the way that it pops up is that it's got like two flat things that like go vertical, and then we set there's like PVC pegs that go between them, that hold the 2 bits up vertical, and then it also acts as the bottom part for the totes. And so it both sets up the entire structure and supports the totes. And it means that our whole system is really light as well, which is great when you have to roll it a long way. Like loading into worlds is quite a haul. Yeah, and then we've gone back and forth on the floor tiles. Some people like them, some don't. I'm one of the floor tile dislikers. I think they just kind of get in the way, but other people like them because it makes it easier to stand on. Depends a bit on the venue. State was really nice because it had like the soft floor. Yeah, and then the back behind Jerry on the right is our battery cart, which we've been using for ages and ages. It's got 3 chargers on it, so we have 4 chargers on it. We have like 10 ports of charging, which means we can just plug in all of the batteries, so we don't ever really forget. I could talk more about batteries too, but we have the ones that have a desulfate cycle on them, which is nice to keep the batteries fresh. Yeah.
Just a sidebar about that cart. That is student designed, and it splits horizontally. So you can take it apart, lift it into a car or a van. It'll fit in a trunk. And all the batteries are on the bottom, as they probably should be, because that keeps it upright. But it is incredibly convenient to move that thing with tools, with materials. It's kind of the everything cart, but it's also the charging cart.
Yeah. Also, that cart has a tray in the top that's like the tray of bliss, because it has all the stuff that is like, dang, I was just looking for that. Like, oh, if only I had a 1/2-inch hex spacer that was like 4 inches long. Oh, it's in there. Like, because that's where our mentor Jonathan, who is the one in the pit the most often, he has like a couple stashes of useful stuff, and that's one of them is in that cart. And then you can see our robot cart there too, is like a very small plastic one, and then you can put the metal handle into the inside of it, so it packs down really small. And so the reason why we're using that one is because it was my car that was transporting the robot most of this year, and so you could put the robot in the bumpers and the cart and a tote and all of our supplies all into my car. But if we had a bigger cart, then we wouldn't be able to do that all in one car. We went, well, we've been using it the rest of the year. Why not just use it at competition too? And then at state, we just stopped using the handle on it. We just pushed it by the robot because the robot's built for that, to be like pushed around by the top. And it was easier on our back because you don't have to lean down as far. So it just the cart got dumber and dumber every year that I was on the team. It went from like the nicest cart in 2022 to just like 4 wheels with the robot that you push on in 2025.
That's very cool. We've had our first leadership meeting with our new captains this year, and new robot cart is on the list. We also want to rethink the wheels that are on our battery cart, and we have a fastener cart that's full of trays that you smush the battery cart and the fastener cart together, and you strap them together so that there's a little bit more base and then it's likely to tip over. Mm-hmm. Both of those may get a redo this year. So looking at what other teams are doing for carts is always fun.
Yeah, I think the sweet spot would be like what the cart that we have now, but then with the ability to put a couple trays on it. like little trays with a couple tools in it or a bit of hardware. That's what we had on our previous cart that saved us a couple times, or had like zip ties in it, a wire cutter, that kind of thing. Another Wago if you're missing one. Yeah, things that you would want on the field. So we were fortunate this year to have a very reliable robot, so we didn't get any trouble at champs where you needed a part and had to run back to the pit. But
Things you need on the field plus LEDs as a requirement
yes,
from our
yeah, we had
programmers.
LEDs on the cart too.
Have to have LEDs on the cart so that our programmers have another project that they can work on when they're waiting for the robot to get done. That was a mandate requirement. All right, so we are a minute before 8:30. Anybody have any final questions, or Mason or Tim or Lynn or anyone else from Ultraviolet want to make any final comments?
I would like to thank KnightKrawler for having these roundtables. This is just a tremendous idea. So we'll try to make it more.
I appreciate that. I might be reaching out to the community via the mailing list. So if you're on the mailing list, I might be reaching out over the summer to rethink some of the things that we do with the roundtable, how we can expand it or improve it. I think the difficult part about the roundtable right now is that this is our 76th roundtable, I think, and every single one's been recorded. And so at some point we start rehashing the same thing of how do you do scouting, or how do you train your build students. And coming back to those topics again, you hear a lot of the same things. You hear new things because, I mean, I think everybody's trying to improve and trying to evolve, and they do things differently. But I love these types of sessions because when we talk about teams and specific things about teams, I feel like we learn a lot more about what the other options are that you can do. So I'm really hoping to do a whole lot more of these get to know teams next year. But I may be sending out an email over the summer looking for advice on how to do this, and or new things that we might be able to do to further keep that value rolling through. But I appreciate your comments, Tim. Thank you very much.
I was going to say, Scott, even though we're kind of slackers and we haven't shown up for very many of these, I know that students have watched the recordings. And also we are trying to get more students to show up.
You're not alone. Afami is here tonight from my team, but I think she might be alone in terms of the students. But I also, when we have these sessions, and I will be pointing out a few things from tonight's call that I'll be sending specific students to, saying, go watch the roundtable and go check out what these folks are doing with this or with that. So if it wasn't recorded, I think we would lose a ton of value. But the fact that we do record these, I think, makes it so much more valuable. And but I appreciate that comment as well. Thank you. All right.
I just want to say one last thing, Mrs. Amanda. Just like, your team operates in a lot of isolation, or our team does. Like, it's so good to hear solutions that other teams are doing and ideas. It's invaluable. So I'm really, really grateful to you for doing this, to Ultraviolet for presenting tonight, for the other teams I watched. Just thank you so much.
All right. Well, I think that's a good point to end. Again, let's do a round of applause. Mason, Tim, Lynn, everybody else from Ultraviolet, thank you so much for joining us tonight and presenting on this, especially at the end of the year when everybody's kind of like, I'm done with robotics, I'm burnt out. I really appreciate you folks rolling in here and giving us an outstanding presentation. So thank you so much.
Particularly Mason's last hurrah, literally, like he is graduating, he is done with school on Friday, and that's it.
That's it. All right. Well, congratulations, Mason. Good luck in college. I think you said mechanical engineering. Do you know where you're going?
Yeah, I'm going to Olin College of Engineering in Needham, Massachusetts.
Wow, long ways away.
You got into Olin? You got into Olin?
I did.
Mason, did you have to go to their little weekend during the build season to do your interview?
I did. I missed week 0. No, but it's the reason. If you have noticed, our robot has like a tongue on the back of it. It's because I was sitting in my hotel room in Needham, Massachusetts, and catting the camera cover for the back, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm too tired for this. I'm adding like a goofy tongue and some eyes to this." So those made it onto the robot.
Hey, so Finn from our team is in Worcester, Mass, close by to you. So you guys should connect on 2530. So
Yeah.
because you're really close. So that's really cool. Congratulations. That's a great school.
Thank you.
All right. Once again, congrats, Mason. Good luck. I'm sure you'll do great. And to everyone else, please join us next week. Binary Battalion will be on, and it'll be our last session of the year before we reconvene in October. So don't miss that one. All right. Enjoy the rest of your holiday weekend, everyone. And I will hopefully see you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.